Hey, everybody. I'm sure all of you woke up this morning, we're super excited to talk about data, right? Yes? So who here has sat through a talk about data before? Raise your hands. Okay. How many of you left that talk more confused than before the speaker started talking? Yep. How many of you feel that data and the concept of data and big data has been overhyped and over-talked about, and at the end of the day, you're left without a way to apply that to your business to get any results? Can you relate? Okay. Today is not about a talk about data per se. It's not even about us. This is about you and how you can think differently and approach data differently to create results in your life and your business.
So we wanted to kick it off and just, lighten the mood. It's
it.
not going to be super, super serious. We're going to really make fun of ourselves a little bit because a lot of us are beginning with data. So not sure if you guys like Dilbert or not, but he has a lot to say when it comes to data. Now, how many guys feel this way? That sometimes you get a lot of data and then it's not always accurate, right? Mm-hmm. With big data, it's a lot like teenage sex. Everybody talks about it, nobody really knows how to do it, and everybody thinks everybody else is doing it so they claim that they're doing it as well, right? So how many of you guys are actually doing anything with data in your business right now? Okay, some of you. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about really the foundation, and no matter where you are, because there's really a spectrum of data maturity. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is where you lie in that spectrum, and no matter where you are in that spectrum, there are actions that you can take right now that will lead you closer to being more and more data mature, right? He brought up the fact that everybody needs to know their lifetime value of their customers. And some of you maybe, you don't even know what to start with, let alone lifetime value. So we're going to kind of walk you through those different phases and what steps you can take.
Obviously, we're qualified to be up here. From an early age, we were data nerds, so I think we're pretty worthy of being up here. You can't see it, but that's my awesome Transformer shirt. Really proud of that picture. So we're co-founders of Praxis Metrics, and what got us to this point, to building a company based on business intelligence, was that we used to have a digital marketing firm. So we were building marketing funnels, sales funnels for clients like yourselves. And we were very good at it. But what we noticed was there's a pattern amongst our clients. We were data-driven in what we were doing, but we knew more about our clients' business than they did because we had the data. And so, well, we had to take a step back from that and understand that because of that pattern, we basically needed to find a way to report their data to them, track their data, and basically give them the insights on what's working and what was not working on their business.
Yeah, and that led to a lot of problems because we were juggling 27 clients concurrently, and they were all doing what you're doing. So they're having different launches, different webinars, different marketing efforts that were constantly going, and we were building all these funnels for them. And so one of our smartest marketers was reduced down to report generation. How many of you guys stare at things like this all day long? Yeah. And that's a problem because, that we were putting him in a position where it wasn't A, his strength, he wasn't a data scientist, but B, most importantly, we were pulling him away from doing what he was good at and taking him away from doing the magic, right? So how many of you guys have either team members or yourself that are pulling together reports and they're taking valuable time throughout the day or the week in order to get these insights? How much do you think that's costing you? Because you need these insights in order to scale and in order to grow, but then it's also costing you a lot of time, which is your most valuable resource, or money from your team. So we ran into a problem that a lot of our clients were not able to attribute sales back to their sources. Do you guys find that problem a lot? Yeah, amen. Yep. So what we were doing is we were solving that problem for them through two different ways. We were solving it through tracking, and then we were solving it through automation. At the time, we didn't have automation, so it was a really big sticking point for us, and that led to a lot of manual error, right? And nobody here has ever had a spreadsheet that was 100% perfect, right? There's always some little nuance that you find later on. So what we're going to talk about today is the different steps you can take to solve this problem. We've worked with a lot of big industry leaders, right? Because big data usually starts with enterprise-level clients, right? It was always reserved for enterprise-level clients. So we started with enterprise and mid-market clients, and then slowly we've been able to move down market because what we found is a lot of this stuff applies that they're tracking. It's the same stuff that you guys should be tracking. The questions that they're answering are the same questions you should be answering, right? So what we've done is we found different ways to, A, track and B, automate so that you can get the answers that you're looking for. So what we're going to do is dive in really quick. So the first part of this presentation is going to be talking about what's possible, right? And talking about the mindset that you guys have to have in order to be successful and in order to be data-driven. And then at the end, we're going to stop and we're going to open it up to questions and answers so that you guys can get a little bit more technical and more specific about your uniqueness. Does that make sense? So what's going on right here is we're talking about the lifetime value of customers. Now, how many of you guys are tracking that as an average in your business right now?
Raise your hands up.
Higher?
Just a few. Yep.
Okay, so about maybe 5% of the people here are tracking that at all. How many of you guys are tracking LTV by source? Okay.
How many really want to attract it by source but can't? Okay.
How many of you don't even know why it's valuable to track lifetime value? Should we cover that at all, or are we good? Okay, we'll cover
it. Okay.
So, especially by source.
Uh-oh.
Okay.
Watch it.
So, especially by source. So when it comes to lifetime value of customers, let me show you this again. This is an example of why this is important. So if I were to just look at this one visualization off to the left, it says LTV by source. Now, if you were spending on multiple different channels, and you were spending equally on each of them, let's say you were spending $1,000 a month on each platform, and you were just relying on the reporting that was coming out of Facebook or Google, you guys all know that those over-attribute sales, right? So Facebook will say they're responsible for $1,000 worth of sales. Google will say they're responsible for 1,000, and your bank account shows that you only made 1,500, right? So by going through and actually breaking this down by platform, you're actually able to reduce the over-attribution that's in the native platforms. But also, looking at the bottom of this, you can see that there's an average LTV of 30, 60, and 90 days. Most people just look at the average of LTV, and they don't break it down by time period. The reason this is so important is because your customers may come in through a funnel, through an ad, and they may purchase something in the first 24 hours and then never come back and purchase again. And they may have an LTV of $25, whereas somebody else who purchased $3 on that first and then purchased 6 months and a year later, and they ended up like ranking up and up and up and up in customer lifetime value, they have the same LTV as somebody who purchased on the same day, but very different journeys, right? Would you guys target and market those clients differently if you knew that journey was different? Yes. Now, what if the customers who came from Facebook had a very different story than the ones who came from Google? It would help you understand how you can change your marketing efforts on each platform, and it would also allow you to get an accurate allowable cost per acquisition. Now, I don't want to go too heavy into this right now because we'll get a little deeper into it later, but that's the importance of LTV. So here you can see that journey I was talking about, where customers come in, and maybe within the first days they're worth 25, within 30 days they're worth 28, within 90 days they're worth 40, and within 6 months they're worth 51. But that's inherently just an average of everybody who's coming in. And then over here, if you're able to see it by source instead, then you can really, really hyper-target your efforts based on the customer's journeys, okay? So we're going to go past this. Go ahead.
Talk about the LTV with our client?
Yeah,
I think it's a great story.
The reason this is really important, sorry, I put a hole in the stage. The reason this is really important is because there are different funnels that you guys are working on right now, or different marketing efforts that have a lot of potential, but you might have been spending or targeting people to this funnel a little bit differently. So we had a client who came to us who was about to kill an entire funnel on Facebook. It had done really, really well towards retargeted traffic, but they just could not get it to convert for cold media.
They had been at it for months. They just were about to literally cut it, and they came to us to find out what their true LTV was over 90 days. And after checking their tracking and pulling through and building up a dashboard, they were able to understand that all they needed to do was increase their customer acquisition cost by $5. They did that. And this scale, with what was behind us, is showing that they were about 15 sales a day averaging. As soon as they made this one change, again, they were literally about to cut this funnel. Within 2 weeks, it almost instantly went up to 350 sales per day, okay? And then it continued on up to around 615, and it's evened out. And at a average order value of about $97, that's over $30,000 a day they almost let go of. Now, put yourself in that same position. I'm sure a lot of you have cut funnels because it was too costly, the copy wasn't converting, split tests were coming back negative, but because of bad data, because of not having the right tracking, you might have cut something that was worth some potential big money in new customers every day.
This is no insubstantial amount. This is literally a product that was $100, and by doing this, they ended up doing $30,000 a day in sales. That's $10 million a year. This is not little stuff, okay? So just by understanding this depth differently and understanding the granularity by traffic source as well as over time, they were able to revive this and really add in an entire revenue stream that it's a huge opportunity cost, $10 million a year that they were about to just turn off. So this is the cost of not being granular. This is the cost of not being data-driven in your business. Because too many of us just go with our gut decisions, right? And we don't know if that's based on accuracy or not. So that's the importance of tracking.
Right. Go ahead.
So right now, there is more noise than ever before as a business owner and as a marketer. You're really up against an infinite number of competitors that are begging for your prospect's dollar and their time. But really, sales and marketing aren't your only problems. Information is your problem, right? It's either you have too much information stored in all of these disparate systems and technologies, or you don't have enough information and it's not tracking at all, right? How many of you guys are using over 5 to 10 different platforms for your marketing efforts? And you do realize that all of your clients are bouncing in between those. And every time any piece of information is stored in one system, and then they go to another system, there's opportunities for data loss. There's opportunities for you to not understand that correlation or that connection between the two. And that story is so important for you guys to understand. So that's why data is so, so important to growing and scaling your business. So we have been working with clients doing over $100 million in annual revenue for the last 4 to 5 years, and just in the last 6 months, we've really started working with smaller clients. And what we've realized over the last 5 years is that taking action from data is the new competitive advantage, right? Everybody's out there online marketing. Everybody's out there pushing their products now. And now the difference between those who are successful and who are not are the ones who understand why they were successful, and then they use that information to take action and to change their efforts, right? So I want to walk you guys through this. Now, this is extremely, extremely important. So this is a spectrum from left to right, small to mid-sized businesses on the left, mid-market in the middle, large, and then enterprise. Up to this point, like we were talking about, big data was always reserved for large enterprise corporations because up to this point in history, it would cost $100,000 just to hire a data scientist. All of ours cost more than that. And then all the technology it would take to gather all of these insights, it was a lot, and it was a big undertaking. And so only big corporations were able to do this. But nowadays, we have big data in our cell phones, in our email systems, in the back end of Google Analytics, okay? There's data tracking everywhere, and you can extract that data and make valuable insights out of that if you know how. So what we're gonna do right now is we're gonna walk through how you can go from an SMB and take action where we are today and move up the scale, because as you understand better what's happening in your business, you can double down on the things that are working, and you can cut the things that are costing you time, effort, energy, and emotions, okay? So let's dive into this.
So we only have enough time for going through the first two, but if you actually want to see this whole data maturity spectrum and get a whole download on it, you can just shoot an email to support@praxismetrics.com, put your name and email in and your company name. So subject line is first and last name, company name of the body. We will send you this whole free thing. It's a great presentation. I think it's definitely worth your time. But we're going to go through data foundation today and automation so that you can lead with those two.
Yeah, because so we're starting with foundation and optimization is what we're covering. And then the next stages are optimization and mastery. There may be a couple of you here today that are already at that level. That's where we want to get everybody to, but you can't really optimize what you don't know, right? So we're going to start with this foundation at the very, very beginning. So I know a lot of you guys don't know what the word praxis means. Aristotle, he said that there are 3 main constructs of man. Theoria, which is theory, which is thinking or contemplating. Poiesis, which is making or building. And then praxis, which is doing. And it's taking practical application of knowledge and wisdom that you've gained. So that's the big thing, is we can preach all day about data, but if we give you all of the information in the world and you don't take action from it, it's worthless, right? How many of you guys have had reports given to you or numbers given to you, and then you don't know what to do with it? A lot of us,
yeah.
right? And in today's information industry, we have information coming at us from all over the place. Data will never solve your problems. That's what we want to talk about today. Data is not the solution. Data is simply the means to get information. And information then guides you on to knowledge, to wisdom, and then praxis is the application of. So if you get all this data handed to you, and you never look at it for the patterns and the correlations, it doesn't matter, right? So let's define this. Data is just simply events and outcomes. In and of itself, data is not helpful, data is not relevant, data does not solve any of your problems. However, information is understanding the relationships between different pieces of data. Does that make sense? Okay. Then we move on to knowledge, which is understanding the patterns, things that are happening over time, trends, right? You guys are doing this in your business for other people and analyzing these trends, but you're maybe not doing this for your business itself, right? And then going into wisdom is understanding principles, the reasons why things are happening rather than just what is happening. And then praxis is taking all of that knowledge and wisdom that you've learned throughout the years or throughout the reports, and then you're making data-driven decisions to change the outcome. Because this is the only thing that will have a different outcome is when you take action. So let's give a very simplistic approach to this, or an example to this. It is raining is data. That's it. It's not very helpful, not very useful. Information is, remember, understanding the relationships and correlations between. So information is the temperature dropped 15 degrees and then it started raining. You can also relate this to stocks and to the money market. And then knowledge is then understanding those patterns between multiple variables that are causing different things to happen. So when humidity is high and the temperature drops and the atmosphere is not able to hold enough moisture, then it rains, right? There's all of these different pieces that make this happen. And then wisdom is a defining line in the sand, because anything before that, you're just looking at history. You're just looking at the past. When you get to wisdom, this is when you're able to then predict the future, okay? So this is understanding all of the interactions between evaporation, temperature changes, air currents, and then being able to predict next week that there will be rain, right? It's very difficult to do this because there's so many moving pieces. That's why everybody hates the weatherman, right? So then praxis, like all of this stuff doesn't matter if you're not taking action from it, right? So praxis is the practical application of knowing that it's gonna rain next week. You would then pack your umbrella and pack your rain boots for your vacation next week. Okay, so that's the journey that we want to take you on in your business as well, because data will never grow your business. You have to actually go and look for these patterns and anomalies.
So I just want to check in on that. So is everybody relating to this? Is this helping to break down data a little bit differently? Does it? Good. Okay. Just want to make sure, because like Meaghan said, not taking action from data is like owning a race car and never putting fuel in it. That's how we look at it. There's a ton of data available to you, and data itself will not grow your business. The knowledge you gain from data will help guide you and your team to make the best informed decisions they can every single day. So to simplify this one last time, move you on the action steps to the roadmap of scaling, data is the what, information is the when or the how, the when and the where, knowledge is the how, and wisdom is finally the why. And then praxis is wrapped around this whole thing, really. It's the fifth step, and you're going to have to take action at every single step of the way. As soon as you get information, is it actionable or is it not actionable? And then that actually repeats the entire process. It brings you back to new data, another level of data, another level of split testing, number of level of tests, or whatever you're going to be doing. So that is the cycle that helps you become what we call data rich. And that's what we're hoping you leave here with, is you're a little bit more data rich from this presentation.
Yep. So right now, it doesn't matter where you are in the spectrum, the foundation for growing when it comes to data maturity is getting tracking, okay? Because your outputs are only as good as your inputs, okay? You have to have data to analyze in order to make better decisions. So you have to first start with tracking. So we're gonna tell a little story about how this relates to any aspect of life.
We're gonna get a little personal, a little bit vulnerable here. So as we didn't have an introduction, but this young lady over here is more than my business partner. She is the love of my life, and we are engaged to get married next year. So we're life, thank you. Absolutely love her. She is my data queen and my queen. But with any relationship, there are, things in the relationship that come up. And we started looking at analyzing like how much we fought. Now, I'm very thankful that we don't fight a lot, right? But we found 3 occurrences where we did actually have some fights. And there were some patterns there that we tracked, right? So whenever...
What was that?
Well,
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
evidently.
what I did notice as I was reviewing this today is that she looks perfectly fine and I look beat to crap, which actually probably how that
Halloween.
would have had up. Luckily, this is Halloween. This is not real people. There was no gingers that were hurt in this situation. Don't worry, I'm okay. She loves gingers, obviously. Carry on. But whenever I would get the feelings of like being moody or getting short with her or feeling unloved or feeling distant, that would always end up in Meaghan saying basically like, hey, there's something wrong with you. That's an internal emotion. You need to go work on that because you're smothering me or whatever. Or I don't know why you're acting like this. And so that would come up. And we're very much into self-development. So we believe in helping, working on NLP, working on ourselves. Like I get all that. But after the second or third time this happened, we started realizing that there were some variables and patterns that we needed to track that actually proved to be more than just me being moody, being my stuff. Because we're data nerds, we track everything from health to fitness and even our sex and all those other good things. So whenever I started acting needy or having these emotions come up and feel that way, we've discovered an aha.
Yeah. So basically, I would always just assume that it was his problem and it was his stuff he needed to work on until we started really doing a deep dive into the data, right? Because that was one data point. The data was he was feeling this way. So we started looking at these variables, and what we found, have you guys read the 5 Love Languages?
Great book, right?
It's a great book. So what we found was there are 5 different love languages, and his are words of affirmation and physical touch,
Yep.
and mine are acts of service and quality time.
Yep.
The polar opposite, right? And so what we found is anytime that he was feeling needy or unloved or all of these emotions, it also happened to correlate with times that I was not giving him words of affirmation or physical touch.
Long periods of time where I was not getting my fill of physical touch or words of affirmation. Those of you who have my same 5 love languages probably are like, yep, I get it.
So what we found was that data in and of itself doesn't tell the whole story. We have to look at the entire picture, right? There's a lot of other things, and there's, especially in business, there's a lot of variables that come up that could have an effect that you might not even be tracking. You might even not be looking at this stuff. But what we found is those are the things that really make a big difference, and because this kind of lack of emotional support is what leads to divorce in relationships, right? And in business, it's the exact same. These are the types of things that lead to failed businesses. This is what leads to bankruptcy, is not tracking these things and understanding their input to your business and their effect and the causation that it has in your business. And you're just tracking this one thing, narrow focus, saying, oh, this is really what's going on. When in reality, it's not the case at all. So having a more robust system and understanding all of the correlating factors is extremely important in both personal situations as well as in business, right? So do you guys see how that's an example of taking action? Oh, so the data itself was just the event and outcome of his bad emotions. But we understand there was a relationship between my actions and my lack of actions. And then we saw the patterns happening because over time, we've had 3 major fights in our relationship, and they all created this pattern. And we're like, oh, maybe I should look at this. Oh, my bad, my fault. And then it led me to taking action, because if I just took all of that information and digested it and was like, okay, that's a fact. This is what happens when that happens. That would not change our relationship, and then it would lead us to major problems.
Yeah, we could have just had the talk or be like, hey, sweetie, we need to talk, and sat down and talked about that. But action was definitely over words at this time. So tell them what you did.
So basically what I had to do is, because I absolutely hate physical touch and words of affirmation. It's very awkward.
You don't hate it.
It doesn't matter. And basically, I had to set a physical alarm on my phone. So twice a day, my alarm goes off, and it's at 3:33 p.m. and 8:33 p.m., and it says, go give AJ physical touch and words of affirmation. So I put down my laptop, it goes off, I'm like,
There we go.
you look great today. Your hair's amazing. I love it.
Oh my God, thank you.
Like,
I will be working in my office on the 3rd floor. She works downstairs usually on the 1st floor, and I'll hear that alarm go off, and I don't care. I know that I'm going to get my fill. I hear that same alarm every time, and it doesn't matter. But I also respect that she took the action and is actually acting on that. So do you see the correlation? Does that make sense with tracking and taking action? The moral of the story is that it's all her fault, not mine. I'm okay saying that up here on stage and on video, so that's
The
all right.
data said it, so it's true. Data never lies. It just tells a story you might not want to hear.
That's right.
So, all right, so let's go back to your business, because in the foundational stage, you're probably not tracking everything in your business. How many of you guys have Google Analytics set up? Okay, how many of you guys have it set up entirely?
Like conversion funnel,
Event
goals,
tracking,
event tracking.
custom goals.
Not many, okay.
So you're tracking pieces of this, but not all of it, okay? So Google Analytics is a great system for tracking data. How many of you guys have UTMs in place? We'll touch on that in
We're
a
going to
second.
touch on that a little bit.
How many of you guys have defined key performance indicators that you track and that you hold yourself accountable to and the people on your team? Okay. How many of you guys have standard operating procedures in place for naming conventions, for tracking? Okay. I'm seeing the same hands come up. So you guys are in foundation, or you guys are past foundation. You're in the next stage. The rest of you guys are definitely in this stage. You guys are probably relying heavily on manual reporting, right? Putting things into Excel, or logging into individual technologies to see what they're saying about your business, right? So most of you can relate to this stage, right? Most of you guys are not doing a lot of this stuff. So the foundational stage is all about getting data. It's all about getting information, because the number one mistake that most companies make with tracking is that they're not using properly organized UTMs or Google Analytics.
And the key word there is not properly using organized UTM. So many of you have heard of it. It's a free tool. It's just something that's completely out there for everybody to use, but it's so underutilized. So it's the proper use of those. And what we're talking about here is for you to be able to prove ROI with every single one of your marketing efforts. The webinar presentation that was here before, every single one of those links that he was showing, even the bad links, would need to have a UTM code on there.
So do you guys know what UTMs are?
So a lot of people call it universal tracking, making all these other things, but it's actually your urchin tracking module. And it was a company that was way back before Google bought it. They were one of the best tracking companies back in the day. And that's all it stands for. So right here is a example. This is one of our actual UTMs we just used in a campaign. Now, it looks like a lot of gibberish, but it's not. It's actually just a bunch of little parameters in blue that I've highlighted in kind of teal there. So the actual whole thing is URL. Can you go to the next one for me? Mm-hmm. So just to highlight, like the URL itself, that is the entire UTM parameter. The number two is the campaign source. So that's like, where did it come from? Was it Facebook? Was it Instagram? Was it Facebook ads? Where specifically was the source? Where did it come from? Number 3 is the campaign name. So was it Black Friday? Ours was LTV dashboard. That's when we were promoting our LTV dashboard to one of our affiliates. And then there's the campaign content. So this is optional, but ours was better data now. So you can do like, subject lines here, parts of a headline. Anything can be put in here to help describe specificity of the campaign you're working on. To keep going, number 5 is the campaign medium. So that's usually like email or ads or posts. Like there's no perfect science to it. You have to kind of come up with your own system. And then number 6 is the campaign term. This is very helpful to get even more specificity. Like, for example, if you have multiple buying links in an email, or you have multiple different ads going, or more split tests going, A/B tests, you can have one link that's apply now +1, and then I would have another button that was apply now +2. So it's all about specificity and getting very specific with all your calls to action. Is that making sense? Okay. Now it's long and ugly. You can shorten these really easily with bit.ly or bit.ly, Google. There's a lot of shorteners that allow all of this to pass all the way through your funnel. Okay. Now there are technologies out there that are proprietary that can break UTMs, but most of your analytics programs, this passes all the way through right to Google Analytics. Okay.
So before we move on, let's go back. At the beginning, I asked you guys how many of you have problems attributing sales back to the source and back to the individual campaigns that you're doing, all the marketing efforts that you're doing. This solves that. Do you guys get that?
Like really solves it.
We are working with companies that do millions and billions in annual revenue, and this is what they're doing as well. So this is something that is free and easy. It's tedious and time-consuming and kind of annoying, but it gives you the answers that you want. Okay, so this is extremely important. And the problem is we come into companies that have that exact same question. How do I attribute all of my sales back to the originating source and individual split tests, right? And we have to go through, and sometimes it takes us 7 months to clean up their UTMs because they didn't have proper naming structure and proper hierarchy. When you follow these types of organization and you make your team do this, it becomes extremely easy to just toggle things on and off and say, oh, I know exactly how this one converted. I know exactly how this one converted. I know exactly how much money this one made me. And this is something that you can do now. It doesn't matter if you're just starting out. In fact, it's almost better if you're just starting out because now you don't have to clean up anything. But this is extremely powerful. And if we could have one thing that you walk away with, it's make sure you're using organized UTMs.
So how many are going to go use the UTMs now? Everybody should be raising their hand. You got to use these guys. You got to use them, okay?
And if you're already using them, you need to go back to your team and make sure that every single person is using the same naming conventions, because we'll come in and people will have a dash here and a dash here and a dash here, and it throws everything off, and now you can't get the insights that you want because of a simple naming convention problem.
And here's an easier one. So for promotions for, let's say, Valentine's Day, you've got one person on your team who's going to write Valentine's Day with a capital V. You have one person who's going to write it with a lowercase v, and then somebody else is going to do V-Day. Yes, they mean all the same things, but specifically, that's going to mess up your tracking. Or there's going to be all these different campaigns, you're going to be like, wait, on the back end of the data, which we're going to show you here in a second, it's going to come up 3 different ways. Does that make sense? That's where the standard operating procedures are that come in that most people don't do.
Yeah.
And so, again, it might not seem like a big deal, but this is one of the most powerful things you can be doing to make sure you can attribute revenue to your sales and all your activities marketing online. I'm talking about every single post even. You can get somebody on Fiverr or somebody on your team admin, like create a lot of these, and you're doing them for all your posts, all your content, all your emails. The more you do this, the more powerful granularity you're gonna have, I promise you. Now, to wrap those up, so the action steps for UTMs right now would be, after you get back, schedule some time with yourself or your team and just pull out the whiteboard and draw some lines on the board and literally go through those 5 I just showed you. UTM mapping, we call it. And you're just going to decide, okay, we're going to use terms for this. We're going to use content for this. You just create your own system, and once you have that, you stick to it, because then you'll be able to use that for years to come, and you're going to be organized. You're going to feel really great about that. You're going to ask yourself the questions on how you want to organize them, and then you can use things like, oh, this is a different slide. I don't think it's version 2, but it's trackfunnels.com, free tool. You can just plug in all these variables, and it creates these links for you. Like super easy, super free. There's a paid version of it that does something else, but we love that one. And then you can even use a spreadsheet. We have templates that we give to our clients. There's like, just follow this format every single time, you'll be good. And then what I want to challenge you to do is just next time you're posting something, next campaign you have up, or any ideas you're taking from this event, just create one tracking link. Don't send anything else out until you create those ones. Just really start using them, please, right away.
And as a side note on that, this can all be customized to your business. You get to choose what this is. There is no set standard way that you have to follow. You just have to follow whatever standard way you choose and then stick to it. And as your company grows, as your business scales, there will be new things that come up, and that's totally fine. This is meant to ebb and flow and grow organically with your business. So you can add in new parameters and new sources as you roll out different aspects, but just make sure that it's organized. Okay. So you want to cover this? Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Well, so this is what we call metrics mapping. This is 7 steps to gain clarity to figure out like your data roadmap. So starting from the top to bottom, this is before we build any dashboards, before we go do anything, we have a metrics mapping session. From the top down, we're saying, all right, what are the business goals that you're looking to achieve in whatever time frame? What are those business questions you're trying to get answers to that you can't right now? What are those questions that you've just always been hoping for, right? Write them all down. Let's get very, very clear about what they are specifically. Then underneath those business questions, we can start to identify the KPIs or the metrics individually that are going to help answer that question. Now, a lot of dashboard companies out there are always promoting 400 metrics when you sign up with us, and you get all of these different KPIs as part of this small package price. But none of that stuff matters. We don't really care about the 100 things you could do. We're talking about, we want to know what those 5 metrics are that are going to move the needle for your business right now. That's what matters. That's what we're talking about. That's why we do this process. So the top part is kind of where we're going. Now we're getting into connecting to those technology sources. Where does your data live so that we can answer those questions? And that means like Klaviyo, ClickFunnels, Google Analytics, tying all that stuff together and pulling it all in. And then validating the data. This is one of the biggest steps. We take a step back and make sure that we have what we call the source of truth. You know, in your, especially when it comes to revenue and sales, are you attributing things like taxes, like shipping, like refunds? What specifically? Because some applications tell you one number, but they don't tell you exactly what's built into that number. So we go into and validate every single metric. Then we apply filters and formulas, which is just like the algorithms, the date ranges, those kind of specifics. And then last but not least is visualization. This is the easiest part. And all we're doing is putting it into an easily digestible format for you to take action on. So those are 7 steps of metrics mapping that you can go through as well with your team.
So here's an example of, again, these are all things that you can do right now for free to move yourself up the map of data maturity, right? This is a spectrum, and every day you're either getting more data mature or less data mature. So UTMs is number 1, and the other free thing that you can do is just create this metrics mapping sheet. Just look at whatever you want tracked, and then reverse engineer and see if it's being tracked, right? What questions are you asking that you're not getting answers to? Where would you find it if it was tracking? And then it gives you a roadmap of what you need to do, right? What's feasible and not feasible for you to visualize right now, or for you to even know right now. And then it gives you a roadmap to success of what you need to go and start tracking in order for it to be feasible. So that was that first stage of foundation. If you were in the foundation stage, your top 2 action steps are tracking and monitoring, creating those KPIs and understanding what metrics are important for your business that will move the needle, okay? So now we're going to move on to the next stage. Once you have that foundation, which some of you guys already have that, then we move into the next phase, which is automation. This is for advanced tracking. This is after you have organized UTMs. This is after you've got the pixels tracking all of the user actions. You've got custom conversions, you've got event tracking, and then you've got these defined, clear KPIs for yourself and your team. Now, the problem is most of our clients that are in this stage, they are data-driven. They are making decisions based on this number and that number and this number and this number, and they're all collaborating around this. The problem is it's taking a lot of manpower, right? The people that are in this stage have team members that are going and building up complex pivot tables and all this piecing together, this Frankensteining of systems, all these zaps, right? And it creates this web, this whole nightmare of just redundancy, wasted time, wasted effort, and a lot of human error goes into this stage too. So clients that come to us at this stage, we recommend that you really focus on the automation component because it's 2019 and we shouldn't have your team members doing something that a machine can very easily. The rule of thumb here is that what compound interest is to your money, automation is to your time. And we touched on this a little bit earlier. You, as the business owner or as the marketer, you have very specific things that are your magic and that you are worth $1,000 an hour doing. Freaking Excel is not one of them. It is the worst. I used to be a huge Excel nerd. Like, I loved Excel, and I would say, like, spreadsheets are my porn. I get so excited about them. But now I realize that they are, yeah, amen, sister. That
is something that would get me my physical touch. Is like if she was in a spreadsheet, I knew I was like, oh, it's going to be a good day. We're good. So.
Boundaries.
Oh, it's okay. They understand.
So at this stage, really, you guys need to focus on leverage. Leverage here. This is a huge stage where we've got clients coming to us where they've got their finance team working on stuff, they've got their marketing team working on stuff, they've got all of these disparate teams working on all these dashboards, and then nothing's talking to each other, or they're just running off of, Excel. So this is something that becomes a huge scaling opportunity. When we automate this for people, it really allows their team to then come and look at not raw data anymore, but now actual KPIs that have been carefully formatted to help them take action, to tell them what to go and do rather than what happened in the past. Remember the difference between Praxis and just data? This is the difference. It's not just looking at the raw numbers. It's looking at the correlations and the patterns and the relationships between them, and then deciding who needs to go and do what. Setting up alerts, right? Being proactive instead of reactive to the business. Because what if somebody missed that, and then they missed that window of opportunity for correction? So this stage is mainly focused on integrating all of the different systems and visualizing. So how many of you guys have heard of ETL? Okay. So ETL simply stands for extract, transform, and load. And it's just the technical term, the data science term for really going through all of the different systems in your business on the left that are tracking different pieces of that customer's journey, extracting them automatically via API integrations or automated email exports. There's a million different ways that we can extract data out. But the problem is on the front end of these systems, it's only showing you pieces of data. They've carefully decided what they're going to build out in those dashboards in Facebook, in Google Analytics, right? And it doesn't show the whole story, and it's completely siloed. So when you go into the back end and extract everything via API, it gives you some really awesome metadata that you wouldn't know existed unless you got that out. So extraction is extremely important. And then transforming it. Transforming is simply turning the raw data into something that business owners can read and understand rather than nerd jargon. And then loading it into a database. This allows you to have one place where all of your data lives. So instead of you having to have all these different systems, now we've got everything extracted, put into one place, and it's not zaps of little pieces of information that could cause duplication of data. So loading it into one place is extremely important, and then running the analytics, the formulas, the filters, this divided by this equals conversion, right? Simple things like that, or complex predictive analysis, right? This entire process of step 2 is automation and ETL, which is extremely important. And then visualization is simply slapping a pretty picture on it. There's a lot of dashboard companies out there that are just like, oh yeah, like AJ said, in 20 minutes you'll have all of these visualizations, but that means that they're probably just duplicating the visualizations that you're seeing in the originating sources, like the Facebook metrics, right? The true value lies in step 2, where you're combining it all together and putting it in one place that makes sense.
And there's no plug and play for that. It takes human beings, it takes data scientists, it takes real people to make that part happen, and that's where the real magic happens.
So here you can see on this outer rim, this is a data warehouse. So on this outer rim is all of those external systems that are connecting. Or here, let me go back. Let me see if I can do this. All right, so this outer rim of those 2 rings are all different system technologies that are storing isolated pieces and event data on your customers. And then what's happening in the middle is these are all data sets. These are the combination. This is the coding that goes in, the ETL, that then combines it all together automatically. And then these data sets in the middle, those blue things, are what run the visualizations. Because a perfect example of this is how many of you guys have funnels in your business? Everybody, right?
Yep.
A funnel is innately a lot of different stages put together. And so, unfortunately, a lot of this is actually what we were doing in the agency. All of our clients were doing funnels, and it was a pain in the butt because, the top of the funnel is Google Analytics or Facebook or the ads or the source data. And then the conversions happen within our, custom system or within whatever platform you're using. And then the purchase happens in a different system. And then we've got autoresponders and retargeting in a different system. And then upsells are happening, right? And so our guys were just simply putting it all together, and it was a pain in the butt. But when you have all of this automated on the back end, things like this are extremely easy, and you can instantly see it visualized and accurately. But then in addition, you can also see by source. So this goes back to that attribution problem. Even if you know where your source of leads are coming from, once they get to the first stage, a lot of times you then lose that source, and now you're looking at different metrics, right? The key is to pull in that source data all the way through to the individual transactions of the customer, not only the first purchase, but every subsequent purchase after that, so that you can have LTV based on that source data, right? So here you can see this is an automated thing where they can just toggle on and off all of their different sources of traffic, all of their different marketing efforts, and they can see the different conversions at each stage of the funnel instantly without having to rely on somebody. Does this make sense? Okay.
No pivot tables, no spreadsheet stuff like point and click. That's pretty much how this can happen.
Yeah. So those were the first 2 stages of data maturity. Number 1 is the foundation, and the action steps from that is go and start tracking right now. If you don't know what to track, then you need to do that metrics mapping that he was talking about. Reverse engineer your business questions back into KPIs, and that will tell you what you need to go and track. Organize your tracking. Anything that you're doing in any system, you have to have naming conventions. And I know that it seems boring right now, but you will thank yourself later if you do this now. And then just map out those most valuable KPIs, and then manually track them. People do get, they skip past this stage, right? And manually tracking these KPIs allows you to see where the holes are and allows you to go and fix them. So that is a valuable stage of the growth and of your journey. And then last is automate as soon as possible so that you can get rid of human error and redundancies and wasted time, effort, energy, and emotions. Questions on that? Okay. Our big point that we want you guys to take away is that in 5 years of working with over 150 companies in different industries, different expertise, we have found that taking action from data is the new competitive advantage. It doesn't matter how much data you have if you're not taking action from it, okay?
And if you're not doing it, your competitors are. That's
Correct.
what we want to leave you with. Now we have 13 minutes or so for questions, and we can fire up the laptop too to jump in any dashboards that we need to. But we're open book. We're fully transparent. Please shoot off your questions to us. And thank you very much for listening and staying with us on this
Does anybody have any
Talk.
questions?
Yeah, over here. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point.
So I kind of felt like, why do I want, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah.
Great question.
It is very true. So what he's saying is that his numbers from Google weren't aligning with his numbers from Infusionsoft. And he said that basically he heard that Google doesn't show you all your data. It's true.
Unless you pay, right? You can pay.
Google
A lot of
360
money.
is $1 million, yeah. So what that's called is sampling. Okay? Google has a lot of data. They cannot process all of that data for every single mom and pop store, even though you may do a lot of revenue and you may pay them a lot in ads. They're still, processing wise, they're not going to be able to show you everything. So what they do is they take a small sample. And the way that you can test this to validate this and see that this is true in your business is if you go into Google Analytics and you track for a month, it'll tell you one number. And then if you go down into individual days and you add up all the clicks, let's say you have clicks for the month and then you go into each individual day and you add up the clicks, it'll be 2 different numbers. The reason is sampling, and they have to do that for optimization's sake. The way to get around that is extracting all the data.
You don't depend just on the Google data. You've got to have the other source, which is Infusionsoft. We talked about the source of truth. We've got to have the redundancy. So we're going to say, all right, this is probably the better source of truth, or maybe even further, Stripe account or authorize.net. So we're going to pull from all those different systems, and it's called multi-source dashboards. So then we can actually have and find out the gap analysis or the disparity between the two. So you're going to track in Google Analytics, but it's not a dashboarding tool. It's not going to tell you the entire story unless you're paying all that money, but you don't have to.
But
so you can
via
just connect
API, we can get the raw data out.
Does that make sense?
So Google Analytics allows us to tap into the backend API and says, hey, I'll pass you all of that daily information. And if I'm gathering all of the daily information, I can put together a monthly view that is accurate because now I have the raw data in granularity and I have it in real time because I'm pulling every 15 minutes. So it's going to sample what you see in Google Analytics, but it still will provide you with the data if you pull it out. Workaround. Great question.
Yeah,
Any
great
other
question.
nerd questions?
Or any other kind of questions? Yeah, in the back.
Maybe this is making you guys spill your opinion in the lobby or whatever, but what kind of automations would you guys recommend to test out for one of these companies that's in the automation stage so that then we can evaluate if it would make sense to use a service like yours?
I didn't understand the question.
What automation? So what specifically do you mean by automations?
So you talked about, like, an example would be automating link creation or something like that. I'm curious on some of the ways that people have used that manually rather than using a service like this.
Well, I think we're talking about two different things.
Yeah.
So we're talking about when automation we're talking about instead of doing everything manually in spreadsheets, we want to automate by pulling all that data through and having this transformation process that Meg walked you through there. What I think you're talking about more on the marketing side of split testing, or are you talking about actual data?
Really just kind of curious about some of the automations that we could test out and maybe put that or on our own before we use big data.
So with what we're talking about, the automation that we're talking about is the ETL.
Yeah.
We were talking more about the automation of the reporting.
So there's nothing really you can go do. There's just a process called ETL. So you either do it manually or you use
Or you
a process
automate it.
like what we have here. ETL is not something we own. It's out there. A lot of different companies do it. It's just it's usually very expensive, and a lot of big companies are doing it. And big data scientists, are expensive. We have a certain way we're bringing that big data level down to the smaller, medium-sized businesses at a fraction of the cost. So we have a specific way we do that. But there's nothing really to go do except for this process. Does that make sense? Okay. We're here today and tomorrow, so we can answer that question deeper if you need to.
But to test it to see if it works, I would recommend what all of our clients do is typically they come to us and they're like, I want 100 metrics and I want all of these questions answered. And we're like, all right, let's start small. So what we'll do is we'll take the most important, we'll weed out the top 5, the ones that will have the biggest impact and cause the most action to be taken and the most revenue associated with it, and we'll go and automate those out first. So we usually take it in a phased approach so that you can kind of date before you get married and see it in action, because typically what happens in the path anyway is what you think you want is not always what you want. And so when we first visualize or automate some of this stuff, a lot of people don't understand what's possible, and it changes everything else anyway. And so what we'll do is we'll always start with a small scope and just say, hey, let's just test it. Let's just see how this works, and let's prove to you the value of this before you go and do everything in the business. So starting small is a good way to do that.
Cool. All right, more questions? Yes, sir. Oh, and you.
I just have a question on the metrics. Your name is Praxis. So I guess some things we wisdom or not with them is practice. Only if you're personal, as you say, mentioned that. But I see a lot of these reports and design dashboards and different types of analytics. And at the end, you still have some sense of what to filter for, what to search for, and to find relevance in the information. So even if you can report on it, you can identify it. Would you say that the average person in this room would be able to infer how to use that information and data and put it into practice based on the way the platform works? Or do they need additional consultative assistance or support to perhaps how to extract valuable information?
Great question.
That is an excellent
Yeah.
question, and you hit the nail on the head. Usually when people are in the foundation or automation stage, they're tracking things because they've been told that they're important, right? A lot of us have been told, here are the top 10 KPIs you need in your business. And so we're tracking those and not necessarily knowing exactly what we should do in order to impact those, right? And we've seen that time and time again. And that's the definition of a data scientist, is looking at why things are happening and then determining what steps should be taken from that. So most of our job really is education. It's helping people understand and interpret the raw data into actionable insights. So the first way we do that is through changing it into a visual that makes sense, that's designed around what action should be taken. So not just what happened, but hey, who needs to go and do what? Like, here are the top 10 things you need to go and do today because of this. A lot of our clients also will recommend different specific coaches that are experts in the industry for email, like warming up email sequences or conversion rates, right? And so we will give them access to those experts who can just come in and consult and be like, oh, this is what's happening. Oh, then it's very easy. Here are the next 3 things to do.
And no, we don't assume that you know how to do this.
Mm-hmm.
We have clients of varying degrees, as we show at Spectrum. Some are like, I want all of these things and know what to go do. Others are like, we literally don't know what to go start with. So it is an education process. And very few of us are probably went to school for data science. You know, I didn't do that great in math class. Like, it's okay. It's not your fault. You've got a business to run. You're an entrepreneur. You spread out all over the place. You have a lot of stuff to do. So no, we don't assume that. What we want to do is like things like the metrics mapping process that we showed, breaking everything down so that we're not looking at 100 metrics, but the needle movers right now. So we look at it as a phased approach. We want to help you grow and develop that skill set. Now, we have trainings. We do online trainings. We do in-person training. So sometimes clients want us to come in once a quarter and be like, let's look at all the data and help us figure out what are the next steps to do. So most dashboards out there, though, I will say, are just dashboards. They're just trying to push you into a platform, so they're making their MRR, and they're saying, go have fun. We don't like that approach. We're more than just a platform. We're here to be a business intelligence agency to help you grow and scale. Does that
Yeah,
help answer your question? Good.
On that note, too,
Yeah. Yeah, totally
Yeah.
agreed. And sometimes we're too close to it to even see. Sometimes it takes that outside perspective to notice those patterns and anomalies. Great question, thank you.
but even, and on that note, there's a lot of clients that come to us and they don't know what numbers they should be tracking, right? Then they say, hey, here's what I already am doing, but what are other people in my industry doing that I haven't even thought of? Or what's even more valuable is, what are people doing outside of my industry, right? What kind of insights can I get that are leading in different industries, right? Because that creativity nowadays is more valuable than ever because of the, how small the world is, right? And so people are getting exposed. Ooh. So a lot of times what we'll do is we'll go through that metrics mapping and we'll say, hey, this is what you've asked for. Can we challenge this, right? A simple example, the easiest example is like, anybody have subscriptions here? Okay, how many of you guys know your average subscription length? Right? You're like, oh, it's like 80 days. So a lot of clients come to us and say, hey, I want to know, let's go to the next one.
Yep.
They want to know their average subscription length. And the problem is, what do you do with that information? What action do you take from that? You'd probably say, okay, if I know that people are, on average, they're staying about 60 days, then I'm going to run some nurturing sequences and some retargeting around that time to help get them indoctrinated so they don't churn, right? The problem is that's wrong because they're asking for the wrong data. So instead, what we recommend is something like this, which is a bell curve that shows the actual number of days to cancellation and then how many people were canceling at that rate. So an average, you're right, would have been around 60. It would have been the middle, but averages are inherently evil, and they don't tell the story. And so what we do is we tell the granularity and say, okay, now this tells a very different story, and this tells you when to actually go and nurture these people as opposed to just day 60, right? So a lot of what we do is taking what we're asked for and saying, have you thought about this way, right? Because there's a lot of things that just, unless you were a data scientist, you just don't know to ask for it this way instead. And so it's those secondary and tertiary questions that we ask that allow us to get to the root cause of, well, why do you want to know this, and what would you do if you knew this? And a lot of times, and we actually learned this by error. We were an agency and we were doing this, and we thought that people know what they want, and we're just going to give them what they want. And we thought we were doing everybody a service by doing that, until we had one client say, I want this one thing. And we worked 5 months on this one thing, and they paid us 50 grand, and then we delivered this one thing, and then we were all in a meeting, and we're like, woohoo, we have it, it's awesome. And they're like, great, now what? We're like, I'm sorry, what? And they had no idea what to do with it. And they just spent $50,000, and we're like, why did you ask for this? And they said, because it's a buzzword. They've heard it so many times from other industry leaders, and they're like, oh, well, then we need to know this. Okay, so now let's go back. And so now we have this process up front of asking the questions, the secondary, the metrics mapping. That's where that really stemmed from, is looking at, okay, why do you need to know this? And then what action will you take from this? And who on your team is going to take action from this, so that we can ping them with notifications when this goes up by 10% or down by 10%. And then we can even put in there, in those automations of the alerts, we can say, when this goes up, here's the action to take. When this goes down, here's the action to take.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, this is just so interesting for me because you guys are in the world of data, right? The world of numbers. And then there's this human component that is just really, really important. It's really hard to quantify. So let me give you an example. So I have a subscription newsletter, right? It's a trading letter, right? Just like a lot of folks in here. So early on, I told my gals, I said, listen, I want to know what our average subscription length is. Because unlike a lot of publishers, we have a month-to-month model. We always have. All the smart publishers figured out years ago that they're not even lasting a year, so charge a year. And while you're at it, do an upsell to 2 years, right? So that's a smart way to do it. So we're doing it month to month, right? So I got my number, right? And I can see what it is, and then it varies, right? So sometimes it's a short number of months, sometimes it's a long number of months. And so I say to my gals, I go, why does it vary?
what's happening? And they look at me real sheepishly and they go, well, you know, gosh, when your trades aren't very good, you know, it's a shorter number of months. And when your trades are really good, it's a longer number of months. And so they look at me and they go, so what we want you to do is have better trades. Right? And I go, what the F do you think I'm trying to do every single day? I mean, I look at every single data point. Sometimes the market goes crazy. And my trades all, you know, I have a losing streak, like everybody does, or I'll have a winning streak. So I was just talking to my buddy here, and here's where the humanness comes in. If they like you enough, and if they trust you enough, they'll stick around through a bad streak. So, and I don't know why I'm bringing this up other than numbers are super, super important, like what you guys are talking about. But then there's this whole other part of it. Do they like you, trust you? Do they say, I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt?
Yeah.
And that really creates a variation in the number of months that they stay on.
So then what I would challenge you to start tracking is how they got to like you. What were the customers that had the longest life cycle, who stayed with you through all of that? What were the correlations between those, and why did they like you?
I can answer that.
That's great. So that's,
They meet me in person, they stick around 3 times longer.
Wow, there you go. That's a powerful metric.
The internet, they're gone.
So a live event or some way to get in front of it. That's
so
huge.
that just proves that the more information you have, if you didn't know that and you were just guessing, you probably wouldn't do as many live events, correct? So that's the power of being data-driven, is asking the right questions. So why do people like you? And how can I get that genuine quality to be translated into my marketing?
We just actually started doing live events again after years of not doing them for that reason.
Fantastic.
So
Thank
think
you for
about
bringing that
the
up.
years of not being data-driven and losing all of those people because you just didn't realize the correlation.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you for bringing that up. That's awesome.
It's powerful.
There is a huge human component. That's what we want to bridge, is that human component with the data component and taking actions like that. Awesome. Well, we are out of time. I don't know if we got to wrap up or what. Nobody's flashing. Oh, yeah, we do. All right. Cocktail.
Cocktails.
Sorry we're keeping you from your cocktails. Thank you all.
Thank you, guys.